Welcome to Beyond Sports. We've got a great show for you guys today. First, we've got Nuggets Now, followed by our great segment, Nuggets Knowledge. We're going to be doing some games of the week for you. And then lastly, we're going to be doing a player profile on Jalen Williams. But up first, we're going to be doing some Nuggets Now. So for the listeners out there, Nuggets Now is where we break down the previous week of Nuggets action. So we had 3 games this past week. Going 2-1 over the last 3 games, pretty good to see. We're not really seeing that domination quite yet from the Nuggets, beating the Pacers, losing horribly to the Knicks, and then beating a pretty deteriorated 76ers team.
Yeah, no Maxey, no Embiid. No Embiid's the biggest thing.
Yeah, I think overall we might as well get that out of the way. What is Embiid's deal with Denver?
I don't know. I thought there was no way he was going to miss this, frankly. I expected him to come in, and honestly, I expected him to drop 40. I thought he was going to come in and ball out.
Yeah, and I expected kind of the same thing from Embiid, especially after their last matchup. I thought Embiid had gotten some confidence against Jokic, and it's like, okay, Embiid can play his full game against Jokic now. And coming to Denver, he waited till the absolute last final seconds.
We were at the game. It was 5 minutes before tip-off.
And then we got the update.
Yeah, Maxey got announced an hour before tip-off. And I get kind of where Embiid's coming from, where it's like, oh, we don't have 3 of our starters. I don't want to play tonight if I'm kind of not feeling that the best because we're going to lose anyways. And I don't agree with that. I think he absolutely should play every single time if he's available, but to wait until 5 minutes before tip-off is just crazy. And I thought after he kind of got a season to hear the smoke from everyone on Twitter, on Instagram, everything about him being scared to play in Denver, I thought he was going to answer back with something big, and he ducked again.
Yeah, I think this is what Charles would say is a different era. They just don't quite play with the same competitive edge as they used to. And, that's one thing I really appreciate about our superstar in Nikola Jokic is I know he would never do something like that. I know that Jokic, every time he steps onto the court, whether it's injured or not, he gives it his all. And I know if he could play and he was able to play and he was cleared to play, or even if it was questionable and he had the option to play, he would be out there playing no matter what. And I love that about him.
Yeah.
All right, so, we want to kind of take a look at each game here. I think the biggest concern out of the week was the Nuggets versus Knicks game. I mean, what happened? I mean, that was a pretty unreal game watching them play, and I just don't think the Nuggets were prepared for what the Knicks had to deliver with the OG Anunoby switch-up.
No, the Knicks were just lights out shooting. The Nuggets came out flat. It was a bad game for the Nuggets, great game for the Knicks. They killed them. I mean, there's no other way to say it. Like, they worked them the entire time. And I think the Knicks are a lot better team than a lot of people would give them credit for. I think the Anunoby trade was very good. He's been a phenomenal defender his entire career. He's doing it in New York. He's hitting his shots in New York too. I think he's kind of a little bit re-energized, similar to Siakam and Indy, and they're a very good team.
Yeah, and even though I decided to put them in the B tier of teams, they've definitely developed into more of an A tier, and I think overall we got to see the longevity from this team. This trade's recent. They're still running on the flow of that, and I think overall the Knicks are going to have to be kind of a wait-and-see team. I mean, we've seen this kind of spark from this franchise before. This isn't the first time.
I think they're 10 or 11-1, maybe 10 or 11-2 since the OG trade.
And that's phenomenal, and I'm happy for them, especially being an organization that's based out of New York that hasn't won a finals championship, and I can't even remember when. long time. It's been a while for them. I know they got close with Patrick Ewing, but they didn't quite make it all the way.
No, I don't think they ever even made it to the finals.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, I mean, that's got to be tough on them. And coming from, these other small market teams as a personal fan, it's really great to see the Knicks have a competitive team this year. And I think that it's great for the fans and it's great for the city of New York that they've got something to cheer for again. But it was unfortunate we had to take such a loss that they handed the Knicks.
Yeah, Julius Randle actually got hurt over the weekend and got a dislocated shoulder. So he's going to be out for, I'm assuming, a couple weeks. I don't know.
Yeah, we'll see how they can adjust.
With how quickly people come back from injuries these days. I don't know.
Or don't.
Or don't in the case of Ben Simmons.
Yeah.
He could be back within a couple weeks. It might take a month or so. I'm not sure. But we'll really see kind of what the Knicks are made of in the upcoming stretch of games.
Yeah, and you know what? This game really exploited a concern of mine is that the Nuggets don't have as much confidence on the offensive end as they did last year. And I think that we're seeing this get exposed in games like this against the Knicks where we just can't keep up.
Only had 41 points in the first half.
That's unreal. I mean, that's
unbelievably
low.
And that definitely has to do with how well the Knicks were playing defense, but also 41 points is very low.
Yeah, that's unacceptable, frankly.
That's Nuggets not hitting their shots.
Yeah, and that's just not a team that's going to get it to the finals, and I think that's my biggest concern this whole season here is we've seen AG take a step back offensively. We've seen MPJ almost get a little more inconsistent than he was last year. Points per game wise, he was averaging more at this point in the season. Not much more, but around a little bit more than he's averaging right now. And we're just not getting what we need from everybody on the team at the moment. And I know I keep putting a lot of blame on the bench, but at the end of the day, it's still very much on their shoulders because we just can't rely on 5 people to produce all the points every night.
Yeah. And I think the biggest difference between this year and last year is they're just not going out and dominating the teams they should be dominating. I mean, the Sixers without Maxey, Tobias Harris, and Embiid, they only won by 6.
Yeah.
That's not a good game.
That's pitiful. And we played with a full roster.
Yeah.
There was nobody sitting for the Nuggets.
I'm sure they're all like, oh, whatever. These guys are terrible. They weren't ready for B-Ball Paul. We'll say that. Shout out Paul Reed. Love
career high. He dropped a career high.
30, 31?
30 against Jokic.
Yeah.
Crazy. And that's, again, kind of exploiting the unacceptability, and hopefully we can see them grow. But I just feel like a change is needed, and I'm worried because I don't think we're in a great place to make that change.
The mindset doesn't feel the same.
Yeah, the mindset doesn't feel the same, but I also think that this time last year we had a lot of the same feelings. We were in a similar place of doubt, and we're also statistically in a similar place as we were last year. So I would say overall, definitely not panic mode. And when the chips are down, the Nuggets are still one of the toughest teams to beat.
Absolutely.
They're still a top-tier team, and they're always going to be a contender as long as we have Jokic, Murray, AG, and MPJ on the same court together.
Yeah. And, for example, the Celtics game from the week before this.
Phenomenal game.
They had a great game from all around.
Well, and then we saw them against the Pacers, Jokic and Murray both getting 31 points. And those are the types of games I personally love to see. I know Jokic isn't a huge fan of scoring. He seems to want to get just enough points every night that he needs for them to win, which I respect. That's part of Jokic's charm. But at the end of the day, it's really good to see him just really take over a game. Yeah. And I think I want to see more of that from him. I've been saying that since I've been a fan of Nikola Jokic, that I want to see more of that from him. And I obviously don't think that's just going to come. But from a Murray perspective, I think it can. And we're starting to see Murray slowly, incrementally increase his points per game scoring. And I think that we can really start to see him finish the year at a consistent 25 point per game, which I think will really provide a boost, especially when you consider everything else. If we can get Murray to add another 3-4 points per game on his statistical season output, that can really make a difference when it comes down to it.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to see Murray do that. I personally don't think he will. I don't know. For some reason, he is just one of the best players ever in the postseason in games when it really matters. But games that it doesn't matter, he's still really good, but he's not at that level as we saw last postseason.
Yeah, and I think that's
is
more
during
of a
big games.
Yeah, I think Murray needs an edge to play at that level, and
Yeah.
I think he's seeks out the bright lights, as people say. And with Murray, I think that's a big thing for him.
Came out and dropped 3 straight threes on Pat Beverly in the first quarter.
Yeah, and for those of you who don't know the history between Jamal Murray and Patrick Beverly had some words to say about locking up Jamal Murray after their last matchup, and I don't think that sat very well with Murray.
No, it definitely didn't.
Murray wanted to go out there and show him who was boss.
I did look up those stats, though, and Patrick Beverly actually has done a very, very good job against Jamal Murray in the past. I didn't realize that. Jamal has only scored over 20 points 4 times. 5 times? 5 times against Patrick Beverly in his career out of, I think 17 games.
Oh, wow. That's good to know.
He has done really well. Patrick Beverly is a great defender.
This has been Nuggets Now with Beyond Sports. Be sure to follow us on social media at Beyond Sports 5280. Call in or text the show at 720-446-8463. Again, that number is 720-446-8463. Got a great Nuggets knowledge segment coming up next. Tune in after this. Welcome back to Beyond Sports. Well, that was a great segment of Nuggets Now this week, just recapping everything that happened with them, over the course of these last 7 days. And I know I'm looking forward to kind of getting to this All-Star weekend, but before we get there, we've got some Nuggets knowledge coming up. So for those listeners out there who haven't heard of Nuggets knowledge before, basically what we do is Bob and I will take a historic player. We're going to switch off every week and take that player and essentially break down all his stats and achievements and try to see if the other one can guess it. So Bob's up this week. He's going to try and stump me. We're going to keep score. I think Bob's currently in the lead 2-1, getting it last week. And then once we do that, we're going to rank them on our all-time Nuggets list and then our all-time NBA list, depending upon the player. Sometimes they matter a lot more to the Nuggets than they do the whole NBA, but we will start Bob off with some of these stats this week. So who you got, Bob?
All right, so the player this week played 973 career games, 372 of which were for the Nuggets. Played for them 16 out of his 17 career years. 6 out of his 17 career years. In his career, he averaged 9.5 points, 9.8 rebounds, and 1.9 assists. For the Nuggets, he averaged 9.9 points, 10.7 rebounds, and 2.4 assists. So he's kind of not the biggest scoring guy of all time, but he gets boards. You know what I mean?
Right.
He's 7th all-time on the Nuggets in total rebounds with 4,117. And then he's 4th all-time Nuggets for defensive rebounds as well with 3,174. So he's big on the boards, and then he's also pretty good on defense. He's 2nd in total blocks at 1,126 and first in defensive box plus minus.
Okay, so definitely a big man. I'm starting to pick that up a little bit.
Yeah.
You never know, but definitely sounds like a big man of some kind.
All right. Do you got any questions or anything about him? Do you want me to just keep going? Or?
Yeah. Just go through your list.
All right. He's 3rd in defensive rating all time for the Denver Nuggets with 96.6. 4th in overall box plus minus for the Nuggets, and 3rd in defensive win shares for the Nuggets as well, all time. So not only is he big on the boards, great defensive player, drafted to the Toronto Raptors, so he's not a homegrown Nugget.
Okay.
Didn't get drafted here.
2nd overall, too.
2nd overall. Drafted out of high school.
All right. And then looks like he's got some achievements in personal stats.
Yeah. So his player high for the Nuggets as for rebounds was 24, and he also had a player high of 8 blocks for when he played for the Nuggets as well.
Ooh. Well, this is pretty tough. I think I'm going to have to go with Marcus Camby.
Yep.
Nice.
That is him. You
Nice.
mentioned him the last time that
I know. That's what made me second guess it. I was like, is he going to actually do Marcus? I was way off on that. I always thought Marcus Camby was a much better scorer than he was. But after that, I actually looked up more of his stats and then realized it was closer to this. And I know Mutombo is number 1 overall. And with all the emphasis on the blocks and defense and rebounding, I was like, well, it's got to be one of these guys.
Yeah. I was kind of hoping you were going to think Mutombo.
You almost had me.
Yeah.
You almost had me. I know. I almost went there. But the second gave it away, and then Toronto confirmed it because I know Camby kind of got started out in Toronto.
Yeah. Absolutely. So where do you think you would put him on the all-time Nuggets list? I mean, I don't even know where I'd put him on an all-time Nuggets center list, to be honest.
Yeah, I was just looking at that, and I don't know. I think the only thing that Marcus Camby would have going for him is the notoriety of the locals here in Denver. I think Marcus Camby, still pretty well recognized, somebody that most people will bring up when you ask about favorite Nuggets players. So it's kind of hard to see out. It's hard to tell where he would really end up on a Nuggets list. Statistically, we're looking at a rather average guy. Like under 10 points per game, under 10 rebounds per game for the most part. Over 10.7 during his Nuggets career, but not really making much of a splash. And then you combine that with arguably not much achievements outside of that. Doesn't seem like he was really getting much notoriety. Do you have any All-Star nods?
I don't believe so. I believe he went to a Western Conference Finals.
Okay.
It was during Carmelo. Did Carmelo ever take
with Chauncey
the Nuggets to the Western Conference Finals?
Once.
I believe so, yeah.
One time.
And I'm pretty sure Camby was on the team then. So he has been to the Western Conference Finals.
That's an achievement, for sure.
And with Chauncey and Carmelo being the highest usage Nugget of all time, I mean...
Not getting many points.
Yeah.
Do you happen to know his highest points per game in a season with the Nuggets? Like highest average in one single season with the Nuggets?
I do not off the top of my head. My guess is around 12.
Yeah, Marcus Camby, like I said, is one of those more notable guys, though, overall. And I think that that's really what would get him on the all-time Nuggets list. Just having that notability overall. But with him, I'd probably have to put him, I'd say 100, maybe. I mean, top 100. I don't know, though. It's like I don't think I could name 99 players that I would put ahead of Camby. So I think that's a little too far down the list.
Yeah.
But then it's like we're putting – what we put Fareed at, 75? We put him at 75.
Yeah, that's definitely true.
And I'd say Fareed's probably actually better. Statistically, at least, that's definitely true.
Statistically speaking, but I think Camby was a little more efficient and had better defensive stats.
Yeah.
By far.
Yeah, the defensive side for sure.
Yeah.
But either way, I would say he's around that range. So maybe 80. I could do 80.
I want to put him at 70 because I think he's better than Fareed.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. So make your case.
Fareed was a fun time. Don't get me wrong. He was a great player to watch, and he's
like a Nuggets Lance Stevenson.
Yeah.
Him and Nene both, for some reason, both of those guys.
They just made huge plays that were fun to watch.
Yeah, electric.
Yeah.
Just those big spark plugs.
But realistically, they weren't the best defenders. They weren't the best rebounders. They sometimes got a lot. They scored a lot of points every now and again, and they were fun to watch. Camby, I feel like, was a more reliant, got the same amount of rebounds every time, got big numbers on defense, did really well.
Yeah.
So I think I'd have to put him above Fareed, although
See, it's tough to say.
Yeah.
But I think Camby was a part of a better team than Fareed was. I think we can
Yeah.
agree to that. And so, by association, we could then theoretically give Marcus Camby a higher notability.
That's
You're starting to
what I'm
win me
leaning to
over.
as well.
You're starting to win me over. I'm starting to understand what you're trying to say, and I can agree with that. So
I think I put him at 70.
70th overall. I think I could potentially live with that. But then you expand it out for the All-NBA team. Yeah, I mean, that gets hard. Based on our math, what would that be? 2,100?
I think it's got to be.
Top 3,000 all time, Marcus Camby.
Well, what did you rank Fareed at?
I think we ranked him a little too high. I want to say we put him at like 750 or 1250 or top 500. Maybe it was top 500. I think we did. I think we put him at 500
I think it was 500.
a little too quickly.
Yeah. Well, so
I don't think I
70
would put
times
Camby in there after consideration of all-time NBA players. I mean, yeah, 70 times 30 is 2,100.
Yeah.
So that ain't 500.
No. I think I don't know. That's a tough question.
What do you
He
guys
still
think?
is-
You guys have the call-in number right here. Look it up. Give us a call. Where do you think Marcus Camby should be all-time? We have our thoughts. It's tough to say, but give us your Nuggets all-time number, and then give us your All-NBA number and make your case. We'll put our favorite one on the show next week. This has been Nuggets Knowledge with Beyond Sports. Be sure to follow us on social media at Beyond Sports 5280. If you have any suggestions for the show, please call or text 720-446-8463. Again, that number is 720-446-8463. Tune in after this.
All right, welcome back to Beyond Sports. I'm your host, Bob Taylor. With me is the Fitted Nuggets fan.
What's up, Nuggets Nation?
We just got done with a great Nuggets knowledge for you. We're coming to you from 98.1 Mile High Sports Radio, and up next, we're going to be doing our games of the week for the upcoming week around the NBA. So this not only includes Nuggets games, this includes all teams. And it's not a great week for the NBA, but there's a couple pretty good matchups that I'm looking forward to seeing.
Yeah, there's over 33 total games next week, it looks like.
Yeah. So, first up, on Tuesday, we have the Pacers at Celtics.
Yeah, I'm really liking the Pacers at Celtics. You know, right now the Pacers are a hot team. Getting Siakam was kind of that last piece that they really needed. You know, arguably the Pacers are going to be one of the higher competitors this year. And then obviously the Celtics are at that same level, if not higher. You know, Celtics battling for number one team in the league right now, basically.
Celtics are definitely a tier above, I would say.
Good test for the Pacers.
Yeah.
Good test for the Celtics. Overall, I think this game is going to give us some playoff atmosphere.
And they're 2-2 in the series, so it's going to be a fun game. And it's in Boston. The Pacers beat the Celtics the last time that they played. It was in Indiana. So I think it's going to be a very chippy, probably, game, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, and that's what you can always expect when you see these two teams meet. And right now the Eastern Conference is really battling out between those positions 1 through 6. And it's going to be an exciting matchup, to say the absolute least. I think I'm going to be very excited to catch this game on Tuesday.
Yeah. The Eastern Conference is just very top-heavy, I feel, where the first, second, and third seed are very good teams, and then 3 through 6 to 3 through 8 they're good teams. Like, I love the Pacers. I think they're a very good team, but I don't necessarily think they're a true contender yet. And I think that's a lot of what the 3 through 6 teams in the East kind of have to offer.
Yeah, and I think what you see from those top-tier teams in the East is just that really dominating star player that resides on their roster. And that's what I'm really excited to see in the Pacers as they continue to develop with Tyrese Halliburton. He's shown that he can close out games. And like I said, you know, overall, I think this is going to be a good test for both teams.
Yeah, and he should be back for this game, so That'll definitely be fun. I didn't really realize this. The Celtics beat them by 51 in November.
Yeah,
That's
a tough loss.
crazy.
Yeah, and anytime you go to the Garden, out in the Celtics area, you want to really face off against them and show them who's boss, right? Like, that's one of the hardest arenas in the NBA to win at is Boston, anytime.
Yeah.
All right, so then who are we moving on to for Wednesday? Who's going to be our pick for that day?
So we got two. We got the Mavericks at Timberwolves and the Nuggets at Thunder. And I think both of those games are going to be extremely fun to watch.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Mavericks versus Timberwolves, the Mavericks still an extremely competitive team. I still believe overall they haven't quite figured everything out yet. But still extremely competitive, always a threat whenever Luka steps on the court. And then you also have Kyrie Irving out there, so you can't ever count out the Mavericks.
He might be hurt, though. I'm not quite sure. Luka did have 73 the other night. So
Unbelievable.
Amazing game.
Most efficient offensive performance ever, in my opinion.
Yeah. 73 on 75.8% shooting. That's crazy.
Well, and then you combine his assists, too.
Yeah.
And then that really projects a pretty crazy offensive output.
Yeah. But he's matching up with Ann Edwards. So, Ann Edwards, Rudy Gobert, Cat, Naz Reid.
Michael Connolly,
Kyle Anderson. I love this Timberwolves team.
They've really figured it out. They're well-rounded now, and they have worked on their weaknesses big time. And this is a serious Timberwolves team. I know we've seen the Timberwolves in the past show that they're good and competitive, and then they tend to kind of sputter out or go through, series. But throughout this whole year, they played tough, and they've been a tough team for these past couple of years. And I think that this is the year that they are at their most competitive.
Yeah, and I think they've had a slide recently where they haven't been playing as well. But I definitely... I don't know. Who do you think wins this game between the Mavs and Timberwolves? It's at Timberwolves. I think unless Luka has a crazy game, I think Timberwolves win it.
Yeah, I think
pretty
the
handedly
Timberwolves
too.
Yeah, the Timberwolves have good enough defensive players to help contain Luka as much as you can. Obviously, that's never an easy task for any team, but overall, you can really put the defensive focus centered around Luka. And as we even saw versus the Hawks, when you take Luka out of the equation, it's pretty hard to force another player to step up, like a Tim Hardaway Jr., who is more than capable of doing so. But especially if they're not playing with Kyrie Irving, that team really struggles on the offensive end.
Yeah.
So I would have to give it to the Timberwolves in this one, and I think it would be...
I would agree.
Without Kyrie Irving, I would say that's a 10-point victory for the Timberwolves.
Yeah. So, Nuggets at Thunder. Denver's not done well against the Thunder this season. Jokic versus SGA, both in the MVP conversation. It's in Oklahoma City. What do you think about this game?
Yeah, the Thunder have emerged as probably one of the top contenders in the league right now, and one of the toughest ones to beat overall. But with how they've played them in the past, I think that the Nuggets have played well against the Thunder. I don't necessarily, I guess well isn't necessarily the right word, but we haven't lost by much.
I just don't think they finished.
Yeah, the finishing wasn't there, especially against the last home game that we had against the Thunder. That game was terrible, watching them try to close that out.
Yeah.
And that's really what lost us that game. And so I think overall Malone makes the adjustment for this Thunder game, and we would see a Nuggets victory.
I would hope
We're
so.
due for one, and this team makes those types of adjustments.
I agree. I do think this team needs to kind of kick it into another gear.
Yeah. Absolutely, and I think we're seeing that from kind of everybody. I think it's coming down to consistency factor, really from a Michael Porter Jr. standpoint, and then we kind of throw in Jamal Murray in there on an occasion.
Yeah,
and it's like, okay, can we really expect to?
It would be a big
see
win.
a certain performance from them from an every night standpoint, and so far I think it's a question mark for everyone except Jokic, who still even sometimes will underdeliver from maybe a statistical aspect.
Yeah. or maybe just as much as we might want them to.
Right. I think this is going to be a hard-fought game throughout, but I think the Nuggets win by 4.
Okay. I can agree with that. I think it could go either way by 4, but I think it's definitely going to be a very close game. Next up, so I'm going to skip Thursday because there's not really much going on. I mean, the best game is Pacers at Knicks, but the Pacers also have the best game on Friday. And I know I'm probably sounding like I just love the Pacers, which I do, but there's just not many good games going on. But Friday is Kings at Pacers. Halliburton will be back. Siakam will be playing. He'll have a couple practices in. It's at Indiana. I think that's going to be a super fun game to watch.
Yeah. Halliburton used to be on the Kings. Buddy Hield used to be on the Kings. Sabonis used to be on the Pacers.
I think they love it. I think they love playing against it. They always get hype good games against each other.
Yeah, definitely going to be a competitive environment. These teams match up well. They're structured in almost a very similar way. I think each team brings its own strengths to the table, but overall, I think that they're going to battle it out the whole night.
I think it's going to be a really, really fun game to watch.
Sabonis is quietly having another terrific season.
Yeah, Sabonis is great.
Yeah,
so is De'Aaron Fox. De'Aaron Fox is one of the most fun players to watch in the NBA. He's exciting.
Yeah, and the Kings just continue to go underrated, and I think their regular season
Malik
record
Monk too.
Yeah, their regular season record just doesn't reflect how overall good they are, and we saw a bit of weakness in the playoffs last year. But as far as the regular season goes, I think this one's going to come down to the wire. I'd have to probably give it to the Kings by 2.
Yeah. I don't know. I think being in Indiana with Halliburton back, Siakam having a couple practices under his belt, I think the Pacers have a chance to drop 150 and like a 20-point win, honestly. I think this is where the stretch where they get hot because they weren't that great when initially during the Siakam trade. Saturday, we got Bucks at Mavericks. Giannis versus Luka. Battle of the Europeans.
Yeah.
I guess.
Battle of the East versus West Euros.
Yeah.
But overall, this is a pretty tough matchup, but I think this is a little more one-sided with the Bucks being the better team. Obviously that acquisition of Damian Lillard the beginning of this season was pretty incredible for them.
During the offseason, yeah.
And Giannis is Giannis. So at the end of the day, they have no answer for that.
And the Mavericks are not traditionally a great defensive team either.
No, and Giannis being who he is, I don't see them being able to contain him in the slightest.
What if they just both score 80?
I'd love it. I would be all for it personally. Just not free throws. I don't want to see 20 free throws per person.
Luka got 73 with only 16 free throws.
I love it.
Pretty awesome to see.
I respect it.
Yeah.
Respect it big time. So for this one, I'd say the Bucks by 12.
All right, that was the Beyond Sports Games of the Week. Be sure to follow us on social media at Beyond Sports 5280. Call or text the show at 720-446-8463. Again, that number is 720-446-8463. Up next, we got a player profile, so check it out. All right, welcome back to Beyond Sports. I'm your host, Bob Taylor. Joining me is the Fitted Nuggets fan.
What's up, Nuggets Nation?
We're coming to you from 98.1 FM Mile High Sports Radio. Up next, we're doing a player profile on Jalen Williams of the Oklahoma City Thunder.
Yeah, so for these player profiles, we like to highlight some of the hardest working people in the league who don't necessarily get all the recognition. They're typically on pretty competitive teams, and these are guys who are really doing their part to make sure that those teams stay at the top of the leaderboards. And the Thunder right now are at the tippy top of the leaderboards, and I think that they're one of the hardest teams to beat right now, and a big reason for that is Jalen Williams.
Yeah. I mean, he's done very well this season. Let me look at his stats really quick. So last year, he actually played shooting guard, and this year he played power forward. His first season, he's only a second-year player, so he hasn't really kind of developed into the player that he's going to be. He hasn't gotten near his prime yet. But he's already averaging 18.7 points per game, 4 rebounds a game, and 4.5 assists per game. on good shooting averages. I mean, he's shooting 44% from field goal and 44% from three. And 18 points per game, closer to 19 actually, on a championship contender. I mean, that's huge for a sophomore.
Yeah, it shows he's not afraid of the big moments. And, right now, I mean, I would take a guy like Jalen Williams in his second year. Overall, 18.7 points per game is pretty incredible for a guy, especially switching positions from shooting guard to power forward. And I'm kind of curious, with his frame only being 6'5", so not really a frame that translates very well to power forward, and only 211 pounds as well. So he's really probably having a hard time on both the offensive and defensive end trying to overcome the mismatch there.
I think he's been doing kind of a Aaron Gordon role where he's just more athletic than they are. So he might not be as big, but he's quicker, gets the rebounds, gets cuts better. He does a lot of kind of not similar things. I think he's a little better shooter than Aaron Gordon, and I don't really think they're comparable players, but they kind of do similar movements as far as their cuts go. They both attack the basket frequently.
Yeah, and that's what we saw when Jalen came to town against the Nuggets, and he was a tough guy on the court there. I mean, really made the game difficult for the Nuggets, and it's not somebody that I want to see when it comes playoff time.
Yeah, he had 24. I think in playoffs it might be a little different. I think he might shy away. He still is a pretty young guy. Hasn't been in the playoffs yet. I think you'll see that from some of the Thunder, maybe some of the Wolves, but the Wolves were there last year. But he's a very good player, is essentially what I'm trying to say. Also, kind of fun fact, he's the only player from Santa Clara to be drafted to the NBA since Steve Nash, which is kind of fun.
Wow. Yeah, pretty interesting.
Yeah. He's shooting around the same amount of shots per game. Last year, he shot 2.7 threes. This year, he's shooting 3.1. Last year, he shot last year, he shot 7.9 field goals. This year, he's shooting 10.3. So he's shot a little bit more, mostly around the same, but his percentages have gone up. And he went from a 14 points per game scorer on a mediocre team to an 19 points per game scorer on the number one team currently in the West.
Yeah, and Jalen's one of those guys who's been going under the radar for a while now. Somebody with the stats that he's averaging this season, especially it only being his second year, who else in his draft class is even competing with at least points per game at that level?
Yeah, I can't really think of specifically any. I mean, Benedict Mathurin from the Pacers is a pretty high volume scorer. Paolo, Jabari Smith maybe, but I don't think he's that big of a scorer. Chet is also from that same draft class.
Technically.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
It's Chet's rookie season, though, on paper.
Yeah.
So we can't really compare the two technically as a sophomore.
So what do you think about the Thunder as a whole? What do you how do you think he kind of fits in to the Thunder team?
Yeah, I mean, I think he does his job, and I think that's one of the most unique part about the Thunder is all these guys have a very similar mentality as the Nuggets do. They know who their guys are when it comes to Shea, and then they just kind of let everything else lie. So Chet and Shea, do the work, and these other guys get it in where they can, and they fill those slots where they can. And I think Jalen is one of those guys that shows kind of a similar thing like you said with Aaron Gordon. So a lot of slashing, a lot of trying to get open off ball. Chet and Shea are where the defenses are going to be focusing on. So I think this is where a majority of those points are coming from with Jalen. And honestly, that would be something I'd like to see more of out of MPJ. I mean, when we're talking about this guy, this is somebody that isn't even really realistically on my radar, averaging more points than MPJ.
Yeah.
And that's crazy.
At an efficient level too.
At an efficient level. And I would love to see some more consistency out of somebody like an MPJ. And I think that's what they're getting out of Jalen, and it just makes the team that much better overall. And I think that's a big reason why the Thunder are, one of the teams to beat this year.
Yeah, absolutely. I think he's playing a very, very complimentary third option to SGA and Chet.
Yeah, when you have that
And
defensive
SGA's
pressure.
been phenomenal this year.
Yeah, and those two guys especially are going to be very difficult to try and combat by yourself when it comes to a defensive, centered team against the Thunder, because you have to double team them. It's very hard not to double team a Chet when he has the ball in the paint, or it's very hard not to double team Shea if he's driving to the basket. So that's where the floor gets opened up for guys like Jalen and Josh Giddey and some of these other role players, like a Lou Dort.
Lou Dort.
Yeah, Lou Dort.
Love
Big
him.
Lou Dort fan.
Love him.
Big-
Torture chamber.
Big fan of Lou. But overall, I think that's where these guys are getting their points when they can. And that's the same kind of game plan, going back to it, that the Nuggets have, where it's, Jokic, Murray kind of run
Whoever's
the floor
open.
and get the ball to whoever's open. And then they have the green light. And, more of these teams in the NBA are figuring out that's a good way to play ball, is have some guys who are all willing to dish the rock at the right time to the right people.
Yeah. Oh, and for context, we are talking about Jalen Williams, Jalen, because they do have two Jalen.
Not to be
Williams.
confused with Jalen Williams.
Correct. I think that's so funny.
I was getting confused with him and Jalen Williams all night when we were at the Thunder game.
When I was doing some research for this, I kept clicking on the wrong profile on it.
Yeah, I wonder how the coach deals with that.
They probably got different names or nicknames.
Yeah, you'd have to have a nickname at that point. And it's
J1, J2, probably not.
Yeah, I mean, it's not necessarily a common name either.
I guess Jalen Williams, the one we're talking about, goes by J-Dub, according to most of social media.
Oh, okay.
So,
well, then that would be the way you could
might be the
differentiate the
nickname
two.
on him.
Yeah, I'm sure it's not the first time that coaches have had to deal with that in their careers.
So I didn't realize this. He was on the all-rookie team last year.
So probably going to be in the Rising Stars then this year.
He might be. I could definitely see him being on a Rising Stars team.
That's going to be fun. Can't wait for that.
Yeah, I'm very excited for All-Star Weekend. That's going to be a blast. He's also only missed 2 games this year out of the 45 games played by the Thunder. So he's pretty reliable as well.
Reliability and consistency, I mean, that's everything. When you've got 2 guys like the Thunder do as your main components, I mean, that's all you can ask for out of your other guys. Be there when we need you, get the points when we need you, and that's it. The rest will come.
Yeah.
And so I think that's huge for the Thunder to have somebody, especially only in their second year. My gosh, could you imagine if we had another component like that after drafting somebody like Chet to our team?
That's what I was about to say. What's crazy is he was picked after Chet in the same draft,
Same
class.
round.
He was a 12th overall pick. Like, he's still in the lottery, and
He's paying
if
off.
If the Thunder keep hitting on their draft picks, I don't even know what they're gonna do.
Well, historically, they've been very good at that.
Yeah, and I mean they're gonna be able to build their team however they want it.
Yeah, 3 MVPs over the last decade, and now potentially another. Well, I guess they didn't draft Shea, but still, he's on the team.
They didn't draft Shea, but he's
Chet-
still on the team.
Chet could be an
Potentially
MVP someday.
Nah, Chet's
You
not
don't see that?
MVP. No,
No?
not while Wembanyama's here. All right, that was our player profile on Jalen Williams. Be sure to follow us on social media at Beyond Sports 5280. Call or text the show at 720-446-8463. Again, that number is 720-446-8463. That's all for this week, so join us next week on 98.1 FM Mile High Sports.